All right, welcome aboard, everybody. It is Monday and my favorite day of the week. And just to celebrate, oh, wow, look at that. John King, you brought us two great guests to talk this morning.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we have today special guests. They will be at the University of Montana at the UC Center Ballroom tonight at 7 for an event called the Veritas Forum. I'll let them maybe explain a little bit more about that as the show goes on. But it's basically a conversation about whether or not scientific evidence or scientific approaches lead to atheism or not. And today we have in the studio two professors. One of the professors is from out of state, so slight disadvantage to you, I guess. That's maybe, 1 point.
Maybe not.
We got Josh Samidass from, he's a biology professor from Washington University, and we have Soazig Lebi from the University of Montana.
Lebi.
Thank you.
Lebi. For heaven's sake.
Sorry, I'm horrible. I gave the pronunciation guide to
I always wanted to be French, but it never worked out.
And we just went over all the pronunciations.
I know. It's did you get thrown on the spot?
Well, John
burned in the fire.
John was working on Facebook.
And then and we have she's from the philosophy department here at the University of Montana. So I won't tell everybody what approaches you guys take. I'll let you guys do that yourself, and we'll just get started. I guess we should.
I want to find out what this Veritas forum is all about. First of all, who wants to talk about that? Would that be?
Yeah, I can explain what that is.
Please do. Because Veritas obviously means truth, right?
Yeah, it means truth. It was. This is an organization that started at Harvard several years ago. To basically bring together professors to talk about the biggest questions in life and consider if Jesus has any relevance to it. So typically it'll be a Christian professor on stage next to a person who's not a Christian, who's a professor too, really just thinking together, not usually in a debate context, but in a context of trying to understand each other and really make sense of all these debates and things that we care about.
You mean you won't be hurling thunderbolts at each other? Come on. Yeah, it's a political season.
I'm sure there will be temptations for people to throw thunderbolts at us.
All right. So now, of course, the Soazig, of course, you know what the motto of the University of Montana, right? Lux et Veritas, right? Light and truth. And if you look at the seal, that's what it says there. So but you guys should feel right at home.
Yeah.
So anyway, so who wants to start? So John, you want to kick this off or what?
Well, sure. I guess I would start the question with, what kind of certainty do either of you have in the positions you take? We have in the studio one. I don't know, Josh. I guess you're a theist or of some sort, right?
Yeah, I'm a Christian. I follow Jesus.
Okay, and then Soazig, you're an atheist, is that right?
Definitely atheist. Yes.
Okay, so let me just ask fundamental principles here. What certainty do either of you have in your approaches to understanding?
What I would say is that as a philosopher, I always advocate a healthy dose of skepticism, so I would not say that I'm absolutely certain of what I believe. In the case of the existence of God, it would take a lot to change. Let's say that.
If you weren't absolutely certain, why wouldn't you call yourself an agnostic?
Because I definitely fall on the side where I don't think it exists. It, he, she, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
So you're basically saying you're pretty sure God doesn't exist, but you're also willing to take a more humble...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I want intellectual modesty here, but it would take a lot to change my belief.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
I have it straight from the big guy that he's willing to take a same approach with you to make sure to know that you exist. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Well, that's fair enough. We can't prove the existence of the external world and external minds, right? We don't know for sure. I could be in a matrix right now. I have no way to prove I'm not.
Okay, all right. Little movie reference.
A little Descartes there,
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
Cogito. So let me ask you that with that, when you're approaching the phenomenal world, we have no certainty, right? I mean, it's very all we have is our noumenal approach. So as a philosopher, how do you have certainty on anything phenomenal?
So there is a big difference between saying that I don't know for sure and that I don't know at all, right? So sure, I advocate a healthy dose of skepticism. That doesn't mean that anything goes. And that doesn't mean that every opinion has equal epistemic status, equal value, if you want. No, we have some ways to figure things out, and science is one of the best one. Philosophy is another one, a good one.
Now let me ask you both. When you look at the basically the twin towers of science and philosophy, do you think that both those disciplines eventually, if studied enough, could possibly lead to a knowledge of God, or not? Or maybe coming from different sides of the mountain, if you will.
I think that's a great question, because a lot of people are very convinced one way or another. There's people like Richard Dawkins that are convinced if you study science, you're going to come away with the point of view that God doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And then you also have a lot of Christians that are convinced if you really study nature and really study
irreducible complexity, things like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I disagree with both of them. I think that there's really the nature is ambiguous. You could really interpret it from a theistic point of view and to see evidence of God in design in nature, or you could see it from an atheistic point of view too. There isn't really anything clear in nature that really determines which way you fall.
Okay.
I would totally agree with that. I think science doesn't point to atheism. It doesn't point to theism. It doesn't address that question at all. So yeah, on both sides, the scientists who try to put a metaphysical gloss on their theories, or the religious people who try to scienticize God, are misguided.
Now, I would. We're up against. By the way, I'm the commercial sheriff, so I have to take a break about every 10 minutes. Okay, so we're gonna take a break right now. I want to let folks know we have all three lines open. Would you guys mind taking some phone calls from
Sure.
folks? That'd be all right.
That's fine with me.
721-1290 is our number. If you have a question you'd like to challenge these individuals, they're very smart. They've got me overmatched big time. 721-1290 is our number. We'd love to hear from you, and we will be right back after this quick timeout. Okay, we are back. All right, and we've got guests in studio. Josh Samidass and Soazig Lebi are both with us this morning. Josh is a biology professor at Washington University, and Soazig is a professor of philosophy at the University of Montana. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think we left out an interesting point. Both of you affirmed the same thing, that science and philosophy, I assume we're including both of those in your statement. Science and philosophy, these approaches don't lead to a certain knowledge or a certain denial of the existence of God. Is that true? Do we both agree on that?
Well, I would also say that philosophy isn't nearly as monolithic as science. Not that science is... There's much more coherence or agreement among scientists than there's among philosophers. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure. It depends on which issue. There are some issues on which we are pretty clear that we all agree on.
All right, I'll pull back from arguing about philosophy.
As far as the question that you asked, I answered for science. Definitely, I think that science doesn't point one way or another. It just doesn't address that question. For philosophy, lots of philosophers have been trying for centuries, and still to this day, there are some philosophers of religion who try to prove the existence of God with some interesting arguments. The way I see it is that none of those arguments are really inspiring for the believers, and I think they're really useful that way. On the other hand, I don't think they convince any atheists. They are interesting arguments, but my worry is that once you start to try to prove the existence of God with reason and with rational reasoning, you run into the risk of having someone else making a counter-argument. And there you go.
What do you think about her position there?
Well, so I guess your position is that... Well, so I agree with you in a lot, actually. I think we have probably a lot more common ground than disagreement, which is interesting given that we come to completely different conclusions. But I think the reason why I believe that God exists and that he's good and he wants to be known isn't because of anything I see in nature. It's because of what I see in Jesus, that there seems to be evidence in this world that he died and rose again, and then I've had a personal experience with that too. And so it's kind of the combination of seeing external evidence in this world of something that would be the sign of first contact with someone from beyond our world, and also seeing that confirmed in my own experience. Now, that's just
very
how I come to
that's very
confidence.
unscientific.
Yeah, I think whether, I mean, I'm a scientist and I love science and I'm drawn to studying nature and how
You're
it
a
works.
biologist, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a computational biologist. I use computers to study things at the intersection of biology, chemistry, and medicine. And I'm totally drawn to that. But science doesn't really ask these big questions. It doesn't. And then when I look at it from my Christian faith, we find out that God doesn't come to us through science. He comes to us through history. And so that's the only reason why I have any confidence that God exists. Because if I looked only at nature, I could really come to either conclusion.
So is it unfair for us to ask a philosopher and a scientist to try to explain God if neither one directly points to or away from God?
Well, I think one of the points that the Veritas Forum is trying to make is precisely that you don't have to see science and religion in conflict. Mm-hmm. And that's an important point to drive home.
All right. All right. So we'd love to have some phone calls, by the way, folks. 721-1290 is our number if you have a question or a comment. There they go. Okay. So John's going to get those calls on. Now, you will need your headphones on to be able to hear the phone calls. So we'll get those on. We still have one line open. It's 721-1290. So let's get Tanya on the line. All right. Tanya, you are on with our guests. Do you have a question?
I do. I'd like them to address the commonality of both science and philosophy, that to better understand what's without on the outside of us, that we have to look within.
Okay, could you flesh that out a little bit for me? I'm not sure if that's
whether it's like from a scientific point of view, they're now discovering in the medical field that the vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve, it has a lot of control over the body that they didn't realize it had. So that's looking within to see the overall overview of the body. And the same thing comes with God, I would think, that to find God in the world, wouldn't you have to look within yourself to find him there too?
Okay, we will ask them to answer that. So you first, Josh.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking about is kind of the distinction between internal evidence and external evidence in terms of trying to find God. And I would say that that at least my experience of God is both. It's more than just a personal experience, but it is a personal experience. But it's also more than external evidence, but it also is external evidence. It's kind of both of those two things together that gives me confidence. So a lot of people have personal experiences that are true for them, but there's not really any reason to think they're true for more than just them. It's just kind of how they see the world. And my understanding of God is different than that. I don't think he's just something about my perception of the world. I think he's something that exists independent of my ability to perceive him or understand him or even agree with him, that he's something outside me, because I see evidence in the external world too.
I want to get a little bit more push here, because there was something that we were coming up to, the difference between science and philosophy. And although the philosopher has asserted that science doesn't have any of these answers, I have not yet heard you say that philosophy doesn't have any of these answers. And so I was wondering if you could either state that explicitly or explain where you're at on the philosophy side of that argument.
So you're asking whether philosophy has answers about the existence of God?
Sure.
I think I tried to say that. So many philosophers obviously have tried to argue for the existence of God. And again, I think that when you try to prove the existence of God with rational reasoning, which is what philosophy does, right? It's not about intuitions or subjective feelings. It's about rational reasoning and very rigorous rational reasoning. I think you run the risk to find yourself in front of counter arguments, and so you have arguments for the existence of God, and you have arguments against the existence of God. So I don't think you're going to find God there. I believe that if you want to find God, you need to find it differently, and then philosophy can help you flesh out your faith. But faith is not about reason.
What about disproving God? I mean, can you find disproof for God in the same argument?
Oh.
Which, by the way, I think you've already affirmed that you have. So
I'm an atheist. I am not an atheist because I love science. I do love science, by the way. We didn't say that, but I also have a physics degree. So I love science. I was in love with science. I fell in love in philosophy after I fell in love with science, and I actually ended up doing philosophy of science. So I do both. So I am an atheist not because of my love of science. Is it because my love of philosophy? There's probably some of that. I have a hard time finding a way to resolve the problem, the contradiction between omnipotence and benevolence. So either God is super powerful or he's super good. I don't see that this world reflects that, and I don't see how evil can make sense of evil or random suffering if we don't want evil with an omnipotent and benevolent God.
So this traditional theological problem is kind of your big arrow in the quiver when it comes to a philosophical approach for the denial of God.
Probably yes.
Okay, we're up against a break. We have Mike. We also have two lines open. 721-1290 is our number. Fascinating debate, and this is all part of what they'll be talking about tonight at the Veritas Forum in the University Center Ballroom. So here we go. Okay, we are back on Talkback, and let's hurry up and get Mike's call on real quick because we're rapidly running out of time here. Mike, quickly, what's your question?
Oh, I'm just wondering who pays them and what courses they're teaching. Is this courses are getting paid to teach or what?
Well, they are both the professors, and so I'll tell you what. Let's let Soazig, if you wouldn't mind. You work for the philosophy department, right? So, what courses do you teach there?
Was the question what course do I
Yeah,
teach,
what
or the question whether I get paid for this?
Yeah. Well, no. Well,
I don't get paid for this.
well, of course not. we
No,
don't either.
I
Don't
do
worry.
get paid for teaching my courses.
So, what kind of classes do you teach? Then?
So I teach a Intro to Modern Philosophy, which is basically going over the seven wonders: Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Hume, Berkeley, Kant. So that's history of philosophy. I teach at the 500 level, so master's level, I teach a philosophy of ecology, which is looking into the conceptual foundations of the science of ecology. I teach in Intro to Ethics, which covers the basics of morality, and I also teach morality and the law, which looks into the relationship between the law and morality.
Okay, so Josh, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what basically you teach when you have students before you.
Yeah, so I'm at the at Washington University in St. Louis. It's a leading research institution and medical school. I run a research group there. We write computer software and try and solve problems using computation to understand drug metabolism to predict whether drugs are going to be toxic or not. Now, who pays for me? It's the university, and also I have funding from drug companies, and also hopefully soon the NIH. We have a grant that got a good score, so hopefully that's where I get paid for. And once again, I'm not paid to be here either. I'm here because it's enjoyable.
The Veritas Forum is going to be tonight at 7:00, and how long will this last? Is it pretty much just till the questions stop, or what?
I think it's an hour and a half,
Hour and a half.
to 8:30.
Okay.
And then there is cookies and coffee.
Oh, well, we love that.
And that's at the UC Ballroom. And everybody's welcome. Doesn't matter if you're an atheist, a Christian, agnostic, whatever. They'll take you. And you don't even have to be a member of the university community. You can be an outsider like me.
Well, have you had a chance to hear from your sitter yet? Because if you can stay with us, great. If not, then we will just let you guys go, and I know you have your schedules to keep.
We'll see if she answers.
Okay. Well, anyway, if we have to let you go, thank you both for being here. It's been great. Because when smart people walk in here, you leave some of that behind, and I get to scoop it up and call it my own. So we will take a little break, come right back after the top of the hour, and continue either with our guests or with open phones. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Well, by promising full funding to their departments, we have encouraged... Surprise! No, I'm just kidding. Our guests have very graciously agreed to stay for another half hour. So
that's right. The actual forum is called "Does Science Point to Atheism?" which is a problem we apparently settled in the first 5 minutes. The answer was no. Both of them agreed on that. And so after we glad-handing each other for a little bit, I did want to ask you a question, though, Josh, because Soazig's big difficulty with theism was the idea of omniscience or omnipresence, this almighty being that can also be benevolent, which is actually something you said you agreed or believed in at the very beginning of the show. So help us resolve that difficulty. This is an ancient theological issue. So how did you come to grips with it?
Well, first of all, Well, it is a big issue, and I would say that a lot of people have been thinking about this from a philosophical point of view. I'm not a trained philosopher, so I'm not going to venture too far out there, but I will take a moment to point out the limits of philosophy in this. So philosophy really focuses on getting things that are entirely logically coherent and looks as that a guide for truth. Now, what I believe about God is that he's something that transcends us. And if we're really truly engaging God, it's going to be hard to make that entirely consistent because we can't fully understand him. So I think God is logical. There's a way to make sense of this, but I think the fact that it's hard to reconcile these two attributes of him is actually evidence that we're thinking about something that's actually real, that's beyond us, that's transcendent.
Yeah, I mean that's the best answer that I think a Christian can give. I spent long nights when I was younger talking with my two best friends who are both Catholic, and we spent night long thinking, and we were actually usually two atheists and two believers trying to figure out things. And I think the best answers we came up for them together, because we were not debating in the stupid sense. We were trying to figure out things together. And I think that the best answer you can give is that faith is a leap of faith. And it comes from believing despite the fact that it doesn't make totally sense. I mean, that not everything makes sense. And I think that's, in a sense, the beauty of faith is that precisely you believe, even if you have not complete certitude or not everything is absolutely clearly understandable.
Well, I don't know if I would put it that way. I don't believe despite the fact that it doesn't make sense. I think I'm actually saying the fact that it doesn't totally make sense is evidence itself that we're dealing with something transcendent. We see this in science too. So there's major contradictions that play within science where certain theories are not mutually compatible. You see this clearly in physics, and you see how we still haven't really reconciled the theory of gravity with quantum theory. We can get into the details of that. But I think that's actually evidence that science is truly grappling with something transcendent in nature. And so that actually gives me those contradictions actually build my confidence in science. In the same way, it's not so much that I'm taking an unsubstantiated leap of faith in that sense. It's more that I have some trust in this because it's not purely a human man-made thing. If it was, that would be more likely to be an entirely self-consistent thing. But then that also means that we're probably not dealing with something transcendent.
At the very beginning of the show, I asked you, Soazig, about why you call yourself an atheist and not an agnostic. Would you agree with the statement that it takes just as much faith in atheism to call yourself an atheist as it does for him to say he has faith in Christianity or in Christ, because you don't have proof of it?
I don't have proof, but I don't have disproof. And as far as I'm concerned, I have disproof of God because of evil.
So you believe that evil is something that you can approach with science or philosophy?
Well,
because to say something is evil, you have to have a meta view. You have to see the outcome of all things, which, frankly, you don't have, right?
It's a value judgment.
It is a value judgment, and I believe that there are moral truths. But I don't need God to believe in the existence of morality, of moral truth. It's an old story, too, right?
Okay, tell you what. We have a caller, so let's we try to get our callers on as quickly as we can. Phil, you are on with Joshua and Soazig. Hi.
Hello. Hey, I was hoping to have the guests address the idea or the concept of the second law of thermodynamics and how it relates to their individual perspectives. And I'll just hang up and hear their answer.
Okay. Can you flesh out your question a little bit more? When it comes to their perspectives, do you believe that the second law of thermodynamics led them to a position or something? Or
well, in other words, I'm thinking, does that second law of thermodynamics support their position in, i.e., evolution, creationism, etc.?
Okay.
How that relates.
So,
Yeah,
you might want to let folks know what the second law of thermodynamics is, first of all.
So the second law of thermodynamics, simply put, just says that as time goes on, things get more disordered. That's what it is at a very, very high level, and I think I know where he's going with this. There's some Christians that claim that that's evidence that evolution didn't happen because we see order increasing in evolution, and then they think that that violates second law of thermodynamics. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about, Soazig?
I guess not, but I can see how someone can try to make that argument, yes.
And that argument makes sense if all we're doing is pushing words around, but this is actually a mathematical quantity that's being summarized in philosophical terms. If you actually understand the math behind it and the actual experiments behind it, that argument really falls apart. It's not a very good argument because it's really saying that in a closed system that order will decrease. And what you find out with evolution is whether or not evolutions are wrong, second law of thermodynamics really doesn't have a lot to do with it because it's not a closed system. So maybe order increases in one part of the universe, like, for example, biological life here on Earth.
There's almost an infinite amount of variables that are possible, right?
Yeah, well, it's just that it might be, the order might be increasing here at the cost of decreasing order elsewhere. So, for example, at the sun or other places. And so total, the disorder will be going down. I'm sorry, we're going up. But so that's actually how you get out of it from a scientific point of view. And it's not a very good argument against.
And we're up against a break. So go ahead, John.
Oh, I did want to get Josh's response to the comment on evil, if we could, when we get back, because that does seem like a moral value judgment that seems like something that would be hard to attain simply through philosophy. Maybe I'll have you flesh that out on your own, Soazig, after we get back.
We're going to come right back, and we have all three lines open. Now, our guests have agreed to stay with us for about another 15, 20 minutes. They're going to be leaving at 9:30. So if you have a question or a comment, you give us a call right now. Hey, we are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Harry's waiting, but we had a question that you wanted to get answered before we move along here, John.
Let's go to Harry first.
Okay.
We can get to evil in the next 2,000 years. I'm sure
evil
we'll figure it out.
will be with us always. All right. Harry, good morning. You're on Talkback. Hi.
Yeah, good morning. As I've said before on the show, I'm an agnostic, but the trouble, I think, with both arguments is that when you start dealing with good, evil, it's such a subjective term. What is good? I mean, you say, well, God is good. Well, the world shows that like a lion kills a gazelle to feed her cubs, but then the gazelle's babies starve. So, I mean, which is good? I mean, the Europeans came over to the Americas, brought disease, and conquered the Indians. Well, that was good for the Europeans because it gave them a lot more land to grow and advance their civilization.
What? You don't believe in manifest destiny?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, when you start saying what is good, to say that's putting limits on, and God, who says God has to be good anyhow? I mean, is that God could be indifferent? God could be rather peevish, who knows, when we start putting our ideas on what God could be or not be.
Well, let me stop you for just a second, Harry. Do you have a specific question that our guests can tackle?
I'm just throwing it out there that for the atheist or the Christian the idea of good, is such a subjective term, or evil is subjective. So,
all right. Well, thanks, Harry. We'll have them tackle that. So.
Continued my question despite myself.
Yes.
All right, so I guess that's for me. So you had, there is different things in what you said. The most important, I guess first a little thing that's easy to settle. The reason why we talked about God being good, it's because Josh here is a Christian, and as far as I can tell, the Christian God is good, right? So that's why we now, of course, there are other views of God that don't take that view, but that's here I'm talking about a Christian. Now, about the existence of God or not, yes, sure, there are. I don't think it's subjective. I don't think it's all subjective. There are some clear cases of things that are wrong or right. And I was just saying, John, I think that inflicting pain to an infant is wrong, for pleasure, is wrong. And there is a lot of agreement in the world. There is actually far more agreement in the world concerning right and wrong. People focus on those disagreements, but there is so much agreement around all civilizations on what counts as right and wrong. Will there be some gray areas? Sure. Is the world good? I don't know. The gazelle, the lion, all those are things that are. Do they ought to be that way? Maybe not. But that's not the problem. The problem is what ought to be. And there are some clear answers on what ought to be.
Okay. What do you think, Josh?
Well, I mean, I would actually agree with the caller on a lot of this. So So I agree that in the very extreme case, I agree with you too, that in the very extreme cases, there is a sense of what's right or wrong. So we get this general sense, well, there is a right or wrong. There is a sense of like actually wanting some sort of objective justice in the world and fairness. But as soon as you get off of those very narrow extreme cases, there's massive disagreement everywhere. And it really does seem like what is good and evil really starts to look very, very subjective. And I
Well,
think
not if you use philosophy.
Said one philosopher to another, because there is quite a bit of debate in your field, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is agreed upon in philosophy.
No, because philosophy gives you a map. So, of course, there is debate about what counts as right, but what you can do as an outsider, you don't have to take one side or the other. What you see is that philosophers have been able to systematize a lot of our intuitions about good. Is it the consequences that make an act good? Or is it the intuitions or the intentions that are behind? All this is systematized, and and then you can have a map, a conceptual map of what makes an act or a deed good or not. And I think that's very useful.
When it comes to your explanations of good and evil, how do you know that you're not buying into your own humanist preconceptions and approaching it with a sociological background of what good and evil is? Just because we're humans, we have this approach. Obviously, there's animals out there that do things that we would maybe consider evil to other species or even to their own species. For example, you said torturing young. We all know of lions that eat their own young, things like this. And sometimes they don't even eat it for food. They're just eating it to kill it. So, I mean, how do you come to grips with the idea of your own human limitations when it comes to approaching the idea of good, evil, and God?
Okay, I should let Josh. So
Yeah,
You're up, big fella. Go ahead.
yeah. So I mean, I think that there are definitely atheists that have morals, and I think that
thanks.
yes. No, I mean I'm just putting out there because some people.
I think that definitely some Christians don't.
Yeah, and I'm just telling you that that's not at all
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I guess
I
I am not very convinced by the philosophical support for those morals. So I think that it makes. I mean, I agree that you have morals. I'm really glad that you do. When I look historically and also the actual arguments, I'm not very convinced by those arguments. The only reason, I mean, that's actually one reason why that's one thing that draws to me the notion of God. It gives me an objective way to say that even independent of my perception that the Holocaust is wrong, even though the whole community of people thought that it was completely right, that entire community of people that disagreed with you, because I know that you agree that was wrong.
Thanks.
And I'm not at all accusing you of that, but I'm just saying you agree with that. But there was a whole community of people that thought it was right. And we see genocide in this world today that it just seems like a very natural way to end war is to just kill your enemy. And then for me, like, it's convenient that many of us agree with that, but the problem is that not everyone does. And how do we get to a point of agreement on that? And I guess the other thing and the other thing I point out too is that
I'll have to answer to that, guys. Okay.
Go ahead.
And I'm not convinced. I mean, I understand there are arguments, and you're welcome to make them. I'm just not fully convinced by them. And I would also point out that as a Christian, the reason why I think God is good is because I see something that we all would objectively call as good, which is someone laying down his life for another. It's a good thing. We can all objectively recognize good when we see someone lay down their life for another. And in Jesus Christ, we see that God is willing to do that with his own son. And that, I think, is the model which I think we kind of see some resolution to this conflict between omnipotence and evil, where we see that even if there is something we don't totally understand there, we see the evidence of a God that's willing to actually enter into that suffering with us.
Okay, we're going to come right back. 721-1290 is our number, and we have Tim and Mike, and we'll try to get your calls on. They're going to be with us for about another 8 or 9 minutes, so stay with us.
Entertaining conversation also.
I don't know where Jerry Reed came from in this amazing philosophical discussion, but why not? What the heck? Okay, Soazig, you wanted to comment on what Josh had said before we went to the break, and then we'll try to get a couple calls in, so go ahead.
Okay, so first there was the John question about animals and human beings and whether morality was strictly human. I don't think that's the case. Sure, the lion eats its cub, but also if you have a dog or a rat, but they've reproduced that with dogs. If you have a dog who is hungry and can get food, but every time he gets food, if he pushes the button, then there's this other dog next to him that gets shocked. The dog is not going to ask for food for a while, after a while. So it's not like we have the privilege of altruism or the privilege of cooperation. It's all over. Now we focus all the time on the world-based state of war and awful things. Now, the second thing is that we happen, human beings, to have evolved with a sense of consciousness. And so we are able to think about what we're doing. And we are inspired by life, just like Josh has said. And we have access, not always perfect, but access to some moral truth. So we can guide our lives with those moral truths. Those moral truths don't need to be in God. I can access them without God with my rationality.
Okay, all right, hold on. Okay, wait, we got to get these calls in because I know these guys have to get going. So, Tim, you are on with our guests. Go ahead, please, sir.
Hi, thanks. Josh, you mentioned that genocide was wrong. And I will respond to that God was the original author of genocide. During the Old Testament, he authorized the slaughter of entire civilizations. And I'll make my statements and then hop off. The majority of the world's violence is because of religion. And I'd like your comments about that.
Okay.
And also, the basis of Christianity being the Bible, I believe the Bible is the most manipulated book for the last, since the Council of Laodicea, and manipulated entirely as evidence for Christianity. But there's no outside evidence of Christianity aside from the Bible. So because the Bible is manipulated as evidence for Christianity, what are your comments about the evidence of Christianity alike from the Bible?
All right, thanks for the call. I'm sorry to rush you, but we have to get moving. So, Josh, go ahead. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think these are really important and valid questions. I don't know if I can answer both of them. I'll pass on the genocide one, not because I don't think I have an answer, just to focus. So I would say my faith in Jesus doesn't rest on the Bible. It's because of Jesus that I actually believe the Bible. And some of this stuff get resolved when you actually look at what we know about the ancient world in archaeology. You see that the Bible actually has been much more constant than we fear. Moreover, there is evidence outside of the Bible for the resurrection too. Clearly something happened 2,000 years ago that completely shaped all of history from there forward. And I think the best way to make sense of that is the resurrection. Now, I understand that some people disagree with me on that, and I'm not saying that there's like this airtight evidential case. I'm just saying that there is strong evidence. I think history makes sense through the lens of resurrection, and it makes sense to me too because taking trust in that, I also get an actual experience with God too.
Let's try to get one more call in quickly. Mike, you're on. Quickly, go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah. Some years ago, there was a lot of money put in the bank to anybody that could prove that the person actually had a soul. And I don't know if these young kids have read that far back, but is that money still in the bank, and has anybody claimed that yet? No, this is an actual truth.
All right, I got you.
And another thing, if they want to know biology, at least call me. I can tell them why a cat eats the young ones.
Okay. Thanks for the call.
Well, there's an interesting history to that, actually. So if you go back about 100 years ago, there was people who were actually looking for physical evidence of a soul, and so they were measuring people right before and after they died to see if there was a change in weight. And there was like this apocryphal notion. I think they came up with the notion that the soul weighs 13 ounces, and that comes up in a...
Well, if the soul has to be something, it cannot be something physical that has weight.
Yeah, this is one of these questions where it's a little bit absurd. I mean, I don't expect to see any evidence in science of a soul. I mean, that doesn't mean a soul doesn't exist. I just think that's completely outside science's domain. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that that's the wrong tool to ask the question.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Okay, real quickly, tell us about the Veritas Forum. Either one or both of you want to give your pitch to come and join in the conversation. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, it'll be a fun conversation. I think, it's not going to be like a contentious argument. It's going to be more trying to understand each other, and there'll be a lot of time for question and answers. So come join us and talk about stuff.
Soazig, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it should be fun, and those are important questions. And anybody whether you're an atheist, an agnostic, or a believer, I think at some point you have to think about those questions seriously. And that's a chance to get you ponder about a few things. So do it.
You bet. All right. Thanks to both of you for being with us. We sure appreciate it. You guys made a great conversation for us. We thank you.
Thank you.
We're up against a break. And go ahead, John.
Oh, yeah. We should probably have Soazig back on. I got to get this moral. I'm flummoxed by I just got to get this whole thing out. I got to hear this thing.
Okay.
I got to get. How do you get to good and evil from where you're at?
Okay.
I just don't get it.
But we're not going to do it right now, John. So. If you guys want to go in a room, go ahead. Pay for the sitter. That's fine. No, we're gonna come right back after this. We're back. 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. We had two of the three big intellects have left. One of them's still here, and it ain't me. Anyway, 721-1290 is our number, and we're going to have open phones from here on in. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
We also have some Facebook comments.
Oh, I'm sure we do.
I'll go ahead and read some of these.
Okay.
I don't know. We don't have answers, but guess what? They didn't either. So,
okay.
Katie says the prefrontal lobe controls emotions and analytical functions, and the parietal lobe controls time and space function. Neurobiological scans have a difference in activity in these areas between believers and atheists. Comments. Of course. Josh says, good program today, guys. Rosemary says, just an interesting quote from an ancient Greek philosopher, Epicurus. If God is willing to prevent evil, but not able, then he is not omnipotent. If he is able, but not willing, then he is malevolent. If he is both able and willing, then whence comes evil? If he is neither able or willing, then why call him God?
Wow.
Gregan says,
I think my head hurts.
If philosophy is thought and or opinion, can belief in God be faith and or opinion? Both intangible, vary within and between individuals. Since neither can be visually seen or physically felt, they must be equal. Josh says, what is the strong evidence that Josh speaks about? I think Josh Britton is referring to as evidence of the resurrection.
Right.
Well, Josh, I mean, you have within the space of less than 100 years,
the world turned upside down.
Hundreds of thousands of people dying,
right?
Because they say they saw a guy die and rise again. Right. I mean, you have a big lack of evidence of what happened to the body. You would have thought at the time to stop an insurrection, the Romans would have come out with all the evidence that said, "Hey, here, look."
Well, all you have to do is go see the movie Risen, and I went and saw it over the weekend. It's I don't want to say it's epic, but it has some points that are very powerful. So one way or the other,
among other things. I mean, but yeah, even if you had all the evidence, I mean, there is this what we talked about early on, the noumenal and the phenomenal world. Like you have the things that you can experience through your five senses, and there's other stuff. And science and philosophy also agree that there's other stuff, things that you can't tangibly sense. And science is really limited by those five senses.
Okay. Well, let's get Richard on the line. And Richard, before my head explodes, help me out. What's on your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what. Just turn to Revelation 22:13. Now, 13 is easy to remember because that's the license plates in Ravalli County, and I happen to be from Ravalli County.
All right.
It's also an unlucky number.
Okay.
God says here, he says, I am. He describes who he is. He's Alpha and the Omega, and those are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet, meaning the first and the last. And then it says right after that, it says Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, which is an explanation of Alpha and Omega. And then he says the first and the last. Now, the only way that you can have something be the first and the last, those are figures describing events through time. Time has to be curved, and it has to be curved in a circle. And what God is, since he's omniscient, he can be anywhere along that circle at any time, and he's everywhere at once. So, since God can be everywhere, at any time, then time is curved in a circle. And that means all human progress or human life is in a circle also. If the United States was destroyed tomorrow, in X number of thousands of years, there would be another country settled on this continent that would probably be quite similar to the United States.
I think a lot of people are listening to this and saying, you know, technology doesn't seem to run in a circle. I mean, if I went back 4,000 years, that'd be pretty fancy if I had an iron axe.
Yeah,
but you know, today I can cut things with a laser.
I'm talking about mass destruction. When I'm saying if the United States was destroyed tomorrow, I'm assuming the rest of the world would be destroyed too, and you'd lose all your technology. I mean, we'd go back into historic times, and we would redevelop from there.
Okay. All right.
That's what I'm saying.
Richard, thanks for the call.
Sounds like a novel, halfway finished.
721-1290 is our number. Well, we have open phones, so we're going to take a break, but I know you came up with a bunch of stuff that happened over the weekend. We have political primaries.
It's good to get my thoughts on some of these big questions, because the small questions in front of me are notoriously depressing.
I know, because I, the ignoramus of the show, am being proven right with Hillary Clinton. I'm telling you, the fix is in, John.
Hillary is rocking it in Nevada. I think she's going to have a hard time. Right now, if you buy into the theory that the superdelegates have already pledged their support to Hillary Clinton, the total number of delegates pledged to Hillary is something like 500 and whatever, and Bernie has 70 total.
Yeah,
which is a big gap. On the other side, side, we're talking Trump 67 to Rubio and Cruz at around 10 or 11. So the gap in support of Hillary on the Democrats is huge.
Right.
But that's only if you buy that the superdelegates will not change their minds.
Right. We're up against the break. So all three lines open. We have lots of audio to share with you, and we'd love to hear from you as well. By the way, a beautiful moment Saturday night at in the Dahlberg Arena, when Mick Holeen was honored, Voice of the Grizz. I have that on video. It's on our YouTube, on our Facebook page. And if you want to go see it, it's really moving. And about 5,000 people giving him a standing ovation. It was great. So anyway, we're going to come right back with more of Talk Back in a moment. Hey, it's Talk Back. 721-1290 is the number. John King over there. I'm Peter Christian. And on the phone, our friend Emmett. Emmett, good morning. What's up?
Taking my call. Yes. I'm sorry I kind of got late into the religious discussion because I just, got up. But the person on Facebook said about, quoting an ancient philosopher, saying that if God is omnipotent but unwilling to stop evil and prevent it, that he is malevolent, there's just one part of the equation he left out, and that is free will. God allows us free will and gives us free will to make bad choices for good or evil, to reject him. So it's not that he's malevolent. Why is there evil in the world? Because God allows free will. That's a key Catholic point. That's why I reject completely the Calvinist idea of predestination, where we are predestined to be saved or damned. We're saved or damned, through our own fault. It is, that's just part of that discussion,
Well, we should talk about that sometime. I think you misunderstand predestination. But I do have a question for you when it comes to what you heard today.
Briefly, because I just got up about 5 minutes ago.
Did you hear any of the argument between the atheist and the theist?
Yeah, I missed that whole debate.
Well, you'll have to listen to it on our podcast later on. It's very enlightening.
Fascinating. Just before we get into the other stuff, I'm on the political front. I am so happy that Jeb Bush decided to suspend his campaign.
Oh, you broke the news already. We'll play his farewell address here, okay?
Yeah, I was jumping up and down and cheering.
All right.
I couldn't stand Jeb.
We're going to let you go so we can play this.
So. I would say real quick, just to follow up on what he said about evil and God being good, and it's difficult to match. Well, here's the deal. As she was mentioning, our guest today, of talking about evil and good in the world. These are very, very difficult to understand unless you come to them, these approaches, these definitions of moral evil and moral good, unless you come to them as a human, right? It's, as she said, it's easy for humans to know when it's evil and good. We just know it, right? But if you're an animal, obviously these same rules do not apply. And if you're an asteroid, they apply even less. I mean, you could wipe out an entire ecosystem without even caring or having a thought about it. So I guess the thing is, from the Christian tradition, the evil is us. We're the evil, and God's goodness is in giving us the grace to keep living. And the gift of redemption
is like a bug, right?
Despite our evil. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's listen to Jeb, who is not necessarily evil, but is is no longer part of the picture. So here we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. When I began this journey in Miami, I committed that I would campaign as I would serve, going everywhere, speaking to everyone, keeping my word, facing the issues without flinching, and staying true to what I believe. For the better part of a year, I've endeavored to do just exactly that. I have put forth a vision for America that includes all, because our country deserves a president for everyone. The presidency is bigger than any one person, and is certainly bigger than any candidate. It's not, we're different in our country because our head of state is not above us, but because the head of state, the people that aspire to the presidency, are part of the people. In a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we elect a president like us, imperfect under God's watchful eye. I've had a front row seat to this office for most of my adult life. I've seen fallible men rise up to the challenges of our time with humility and clarity of purpose to make our nation safer, stronger, and freer. I firmly believe the American people must entrust this office to someone who understands that whoever holds it is a servant, not the master. Someone who will commit to that service with honor and decency. Our next president will lead an extraordinary country whose people have always made the improbable possible in big ways and small. Every day, Americans test the boundaries of freedom and achieve more than what they could have ever dreamed. But over the last 7 years, our nation's bright light has become little more than a flicker. We have retreated from the world stage. The American values that have brought peace and opportunity are fading. That is not the America we know and love. America is a country that thinks big, acts boldly, and leads without apology. It will be up to the next president to restore that kind of leadership. I'm proud of the campaign that we've run to unify our country and to advocate conservative solutions that would give more Americans the opportunity to rise up and reach their God-given potential. But the people of Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina have spoken, and I really respect their decision. So tonight, I am suspending my campaign.
Okay, there you go. So Jeb Bush is gone, and some people think that Ben Carson may be next, or Mr. Kasich may be next.
A lot of people thought Mr. Carson was going to go, too.
Yeah. So we're up against the break. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we have lots more to share with you, and we have all three lines open. Little open phones action going on today, and we'll be right back. We're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. All three lines open, but we have about 7 minutes left here. How's that, Mike?
That was pretty good. I like
we spare no expense on the sound effects.
Okay, so after
yes.
When you said earlier that you were closer to being right, I think you are. The closer Trump comes to being nominated on the Republican side, and the closer that Hillary Clinton comes to being nominated on the Democratic side, Hillary's prediction that Hillary wins comes more into focus.
Yeah, that'd be my prediction.
I'm sorry, yeah, Peter's.
My prediction. I'm not Hillary.
Oh. Well, I think Hillary also predicted she would win.
I'm almost as old as her, but I'm not Hillary. But
no one's almost as old as her.
Yeah, so I said it.
Let's play a clip. This is Hillary kind of, and I think she does a really good job here of summing up the problem many voters have.
Really?
She asks the fundamental question for most voters as she's talking to the press, and hopefully she can, well, you can just hear what she says.
Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the possible next president of the United States.
I'm going to keep, reaching out to voters. I understand that voters have questions. I'm going to do my very best to answer those questions. I think there's an underlying question that maybe is really in the back of people's minds, and that is, is she in it for us or is she in it for herself? I think that's, a question that people are trying to sort through. And I'm going to demonstrate that I've always been the same person, fighting for the same values, fighting to make a real difference in people's lives.
What?
I like that. I like the way that she said underlying. But yeah, that is the big question for her. Is she in it for herself or is she in it for us, the public? Now, when it comes to Trump, I think the question's obviously answered. He's in it for himself. But when it comes to it for Hillary, I also have the same answer. Yeah, she's in it for herself.
So basically, you have two people who are coming together, if they both get the nomination, that are complete narcissists, right? That are going to be saying, enough about you. Enough about me. What do you think about me? And then she'll say, enough about me. What do you think about me? And so on and on we'll go. It'll be interesting.
So you've heard about the stolen china from the White House?
Yes.
Every time.
Yes.
Every time I think back on, are they in it for themselves or are they in it for us?
Well,
you took the people's china, $200,000.
No, you have to remember, John. When they left, they were broke. They had to take furniture and china and stuff just to furnish their own house in Passaquah or whatever the place is where they lived. I mean, it was theirs. I mean, it was what they lived there. And so they could just, when you leave, you box up your stuff and you take it with you. That's just what it is, you see.
Actually, that is the way it is for the executive branch. So when it comes to gifts given to the White House,
right,
every office has strict rules about what you can take, what you can't take.
Right.
Every role except for the executive branch.
Okay.
Or except for the president.
Right.
And they took what they could.
Oh yeah,
apparently.
Well, I wondered. Now, here's the question: Did they take all that stuff and then have a big rummage sale so they could raise money? Because obviously they were broke.
They were broke after, and everyone knows that.
So if they took all that expensive china and furniture and went out in front of the White House and had a big rummage sale, I think that would be kind of cool for them to do that.
Yeah, something tells me none of that was given away. I mean, they took sofas. They took. I'm not kidding.
I know, but just imagine the Clinton garage sale. Can you imagine? And
what's this old computer here?
Yeah. you would get there at dark 30 and knocking on the door. Say, hey, is this thing for sale here? Is this how much is this? Will you take 50 cents for this?
Is that a wired bathroom ceiling tile? I guess I'll take that. I don't know why. What are all these listening devices for?
Oh gosh, I wonder if that wasn't the foundation for the Clinton Foundation. If that wasn't they had a big rummage sale and they got a bunch of cash together and they said, let's start a foundation. And then, we could take money from Saudi Arabia and from Russia and from people all over the world, and
Goldman Sachs.
We'll do good things for them, so that when I'm president, they'll be my friends.
Yeah. So
anyway,
one more thing before we run out of time.
Okay.
The Cruz campaign has some of the best commercials and some of the dirtiest tricks.
Oh, yeah?
It seems to me this election cycle.
Wow. Okay.
One of the dirtiest tricks, maybe we won't have time to talk about, but let's listen to one of the highlights. One of my favorite movies is a comedy called Office Space. There's some cursing in the movie, so not for kids. But one of the lines that has a lot of cursing is they play this really heavy kind of rap music while these nerdy white guys, and I guess there's an Indian guy too, these nerdy, uptight white collar guys, I should say, go out and destroy a copier machine that has just been giving them heck.
It's the bane of their existence.
Always doesn't print right or prints twice or misprints. Well, this is a picture. This video is Hillary Clinton and her team busting up a computer server to music scripted by, I guess, the Cruz campaign.
Here we go. Feel free to sing along.
Feels good to be a Clinton. Damn, it feels good to be a Clinton. A shameless politician always plays her cards right. Got a crew for the fight on the airwaves. Lapdogs in the press keep the mouths tight. Cause a Clinton never needs to explain why it is what they done or with who. A real Clinton knows that they're entitled, and you don't get to know what they do.
What difference does it make?
For a Clinton, what's loaded in some fat Apple file? A Clinton plays the victim for promotion. A Clinton kills it off with a smile. Damn, it feels good to be a Clinton. A server full of secrets ain't no thing. Damn, it feels good to be a Clinton. Nothing ever hits with the sting.
Okay, so there
if you had seen the movie, man, that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Okay, what's coming up on tomorrow's fabulous show?
Well, I am not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure we're going to have a conversation with Angel, one of the DJs in our unit here, and she recently decided to get sober. It'll be really impactful. And then also Sled Patriots.